Welcome back to the final programming block of SEOGS Networks, and we hope you've had a productive few days so far. The final programming block is focused on marketing and negotiation, and we've got two fantastic presenters to conclude the sort of 2 days of live programming. The first presenter is Timothy Mendoka, Managing Director, EAG Airport Management, operator of the heliport Paramaribo. Born and raised in Paramaribo, Suriname, Timothy started his professional career with Airport Management Limited. He studied in the Netherlands and successfully completed his master's degree in airport planning and management at Cranfield University in England. Timothy returned to Suriname and has been an integral part of Airport Management Limited since 2011. From policy advisor to head of corporate planning and development department, responsible for policy matters, strategic planning, and much more, to acting CEO of the International Airport in July 2019. As of October 2022, Timothy became the managing director of EAG Airport Management Limited, leading the transformation of heliport Paramaribo to a regional airport with his aviation knowledge, drive, and vision. So very happy to hand over for a fantastic success story.
Good afternoon, and thank you also to the organization for giving us the opportunity to share our story. Our story, while we grew into one of the leading facilitators and organizations to service the oil and gas offshore operations. I'm responsible for the EAG Airport, the operator of the heliport Paramaribo. We are a sister company of Gamer and Suriname Sky Farmers. Those two companies have over 50 years experience in crop dusting in the east of Suriname and in domestic aviation. In domestic aviation, if you think about it, Gamer is one of the companies you would always think of, amongst others, obviously. So with that experience we have that in the aviation industry is, if you would get international companies coming in, they would come and they needed to do something for domestic aviation, they would come to Gamer, and that's what happened in 2013. In 2013, amongst our experience, but also to our networking of the owners, in all the different networking sessions and networking amongst those international companies, we were approached and asked how we could solve their issue of facilitating the helicopter companies to facilitate offshore drilling. Initially, they had looked into Zorg and Hope, which did not quite meet all the different standards they were looking into. So they had built a full business case from operating from the international airport, because they were 24/7 open, and they had their own fire department 24/7 available. So from a safety point of view, that was ideal. In terms of location, with over 40 kilometers from the city center and the shore, it was not ideal. So we have a lot of land near shore available, so we offered the opportunity to build a heliport. And build a heliport not only because it's close to shore, but we're very close to near the emergency hospital, so that created an ideal location close to the city center, but also in combination with the resort we have, the Oxygen Resort on the premises. It created a very interesting dynamic to have everything ideal located at one location. So we started talking of the opportunity. We started bouncing around ideas with that oil company to see what the opportunities would be for us to build the heliport. We initially had offered a piece of land for them to build the heliport, but they were not interested in doing the investment themselves. They were interested in renting. So we started out, applied for the economic license, but also preparing all the plans towards the technical requirements we had for that needed to facilitate a heliport. But before we could commence the construction of this, specific oil and gas company, they decided not to move forward at that time. So they left, but they left their plans. So even though there was no direct opportunity at that moment, we did take the opportunity to do the investment and build the heliport. So we proceeded, we invested in the heliport, and we built the facilities in 2013. It was only in 2015 that we were again approached by an additional oil and gas company. And we were approached because we stayed on the radar. We kept networking, we kept being available for these companies to see what we have. We mentioned that we had the heliport. So when they saw our facilities, they said, perfect, you have the heliport, the infra, that's perfect, but we need a hangar, and we need it in 6 months. So again, we did the investment up front, and we, I think the day after the hangar was open, the facilities were open, the helicopter company was here, and they started exploration. So we've been facilitating those helicopter companies from that moment on. I think we had a few months here and there where we did not have any operations. So, but overall, we are currently the preferred, and I would say the only dedicated heliport that offers the facilities near shore towards for all the oil and gas explorations. So in 2017, there was additional demand for more helicopter operations. So we built a second hangar to being able to facilitate more helicopters. Our operations vary between 3 to 6, but at a peak we had 19 helicopter movements one day. So we had a lot of movements going on, and this goes on and on because the contracts vary a lot depending on the oil company they are servicing and all those different types of things. So in 2018, we had another request from one of the oil and gas companies, and they had mentioned that for safety reasons, they beyond the heliport itself, so, as our facilities were, they needed an additional kilometer of paved rejected takeoff area. That would mean that we would have to build something that looked like a runway of a kilometer in order to be able to facilitate that if there would be some type of need or emergency for the helicopter while in takeoff to land back, they would have a kilometer of rejected area to be able to land again. So that was quite a big investment for us initially, but it did spark some of the ideas to grow our facilities beyond the heliport and beyond the facilities we had. Adding another kilometer to our facilities would mean that we would have a runway that would be a potential runway that would be longer than the facility that is currently at Zorg and Hope. So that's where we saw the opportunity to offer to build a facility from a heliport transition into a small airport, and to be able to accommodate more than only oil and gas, more than only the helicopters that would fly offshore, but also to connect to anything in the region with this definite limitation to it. So that's where the idea started of having an airport, and that's where we started planning, doing a master plan to see what the opportunities are, what are the requirements you would need to, which type of certificates we would need, all those different type of steps we put in place. And we started building in 2019, and the runway itself is, the infrastructure is finished, and we finished it in 2022, but there's a lot of other facilities we need to build towards it, and the idea is to have the airport open in 2024 to be a secondary airport and to facilitate our traffic that Comair moves between Paramaribo and Georgetown on the 3 times daily flights, to operate those international flights from our own facilities here at the current heliport. So ideally, we've moved, every time we've moved, we've taken the risk, we've moved forward into doing the investments beyond having anything concrete, any contract properly signed, but we've anticipated on things that would come in the future. And that's the thing we would stimulate all the companies, small and big, to move forward and to anticipate on what would come in the future. Yes, the exploration or the production has moved towards 2027, but it wouldn't mean that we would have to sleep. No, we would need to collaborate. We would need to continue our network. We would need to prepare for what would coming, and even need to work together amongst each other in the private sector, but also with the government. We've had instances, for example, where during COVID, we had dedicated charter, even though the borders were closed, we had dedicated charters coming in with collaboration of the government, get them in with the charter, bus them to our facilities here at Oxygen Resort, and have them dedicated into a bubble and be able to move around still. So beyond what was actually the regular commercial opportunities. So it's about the collaboration. It's about collaboration, being at the right spot, so being open to networking, but also making people, letting people know what your capabilities are and what opportunities you offer them to solve the problems. These companies, they come in, they look at, usually want one partner to work with to arrange everything for them. So that's why we're trying to facilitate. So I think that for Surinamese companies, for the local content that we are, and that we represent, I think that we should put ourselves out there, but be able to serve and be able to work obviously for our own businesses towards the future, but also for our economy towards the future, to facilitate the oil and gas and to facilitate, be able to facilitate the growth. So again, thank you, and we hope we get inspired by our story. Thank you.
Hi, Timothy. Thank you so much for your presentation. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, Alex. Thank you for the opportunity, obviously.
No worries at all. I mean, it really is an inspiring sort of story and a great success story and a fantastic kind of development journey that you've been on and that you still are on. And I think when we spoke, we've met a couple of times and spoken a few times. I hadn't quite realized myself just kind of the size and the scope and the scale of what you guys have been doing. So I think it's really great for people to be more aware of that. And you mentioned sort of putting yourself out there, and I guess I'm not a target kind of a client or company, and maybe that's why I didn't know so much about the project. But obviously the people that are hearing about it and using your facilities, and I think it's one of a number of fantastic success stories in Suriname. And we heard about the Kirsten group yesterday and their JV and training facility. We heard about Kuldeep Singh and the port facility, and that they are completely in-housing some of the IOCs and operators operations. And there's lots more emerging kind of success stories. And that's one of the things I've always found very inspiring about Suriname is hearing about these companies and the great work they're doing. And I think you really emphasized and kind of nailed the importance of continuing that dialogue and understanding the needs of the industry and building those long-term relationships. And I guess also seeing that the opportunity in the market and having that vision. And as you said yourself, kind of taking that risk. And that there is a lot of risk there. And so I guess that was one of the first questions. And I've had some questions coming through on various parts of the platform. I mean, how do you, as a business, kind of mitigate against that risk?
So actually, it is quite challenging to take those decisions, because if you look at the investments and the amount of capital is needed for these investments, it's definitely taking a major risk. But in our case, it was knowing the industry, having over 50 years experience, that gives you a certain amount of buffer, but it also gives you a certain amount of trust at the local financing institutes to back you in this. And having the talks with the IOCs and staying close to them, staying within the network, it really does give you an idea and a direction which direction it would go towards. And that does give you some type of, I wouldn't say it wouldn't fully mitigate the risk we took, but it does give you a certain amount of opportunity seeing in the future. The thing is that our facility is already operational, and it is beyond, or it is prior to any FID and any production decision. We are already facilitating that steps towards the exploration and everything. So we did see those opportunities coming up. And the ideal thing is that we, due to our location and due to our the other facilities that didn't meet all the safety standards, I think that is where our where we saw the opportunity to mitigate the risk, that we would be the preferred facility. So I would say look at the total picture. Don't underestimate one, or don't only look at the financing part, but look at the total picture of the value you could add to the oil and gas companies. I think that we've been very successful in that, in being able to add value to the business they're doing.
Yeah, no, agreed. I think the value proposition and the sort of educated, calculated risk is kind of the key takeout from that. I mean, you touched on something else that I wanted to ask was the finance. I mean, there's a huge kind of capital outlay in these sort of projects. I mean, as a business, have you been tapping international finance markets? I mean, how do you raise that capital? Is it from local banks, investment banks, multilateral finance institutions? How have you been sort of going about getting the access to capital?
Yeah. So the thing is that it's a combination. We've looked at different options. We've looked at international, definitely looked at international capital, and also looked at local banks as well. The thing is that because we've been in the game initially, the need for investments came in different stages and also in different levels. So it was a gradual growth in the amount of capital we would be needed. Now is the biggest pressure we had. We've been lucky to be able to get it financed by a local financier. It's always the certain tipping point. To a certain extent, you can get the money, and then if you're in that range, you can get it locally, and then you're too small for the international financing part. So you need to find the sweet spot, but definitely talk with everyone. We were lucky to get a good deal with our local financiers, and I think we pride ourselves to being a Surinamese, 100% Surinamese owned company, and we get business from the international companies, but we love to do business with local companies, because we see that as local companies, we need to support each other, and we need to, where possible, to collaborate. So we're happy to be financed by a local bank, but in the future and future developments, it might be that we might move into international capital as well. We are having talks with them. So we're looking at what would work the best for us, obviously.
Good to know. And I think again, the key takeout I took from that is the sort of organic growth and doing things in stages. And we will certainly look from our side to bring in more international financiers to this year's event in June, because I think that as the market grows, more of that access to capital will be needed. And I think you said that it was 2024 when the airport opened, running the flights from Paramaribo to Georgetown.
Yes, that's where we initially start. We're looking at multiple destinations, obviously, but we're still in the study phase. We have a year out. So we're adding a new aircraft, the Sky Courier, to our fleet. So that would, our sister company's fleet. So that would mean that we'll be the first one in the region with that new aircraft. It's being produced at the moment. So a year in, it will increase our capacity in the aircraft, but it also increase the comfort and safety on both ends. So it will give us the additional competitive advantage, and that would also open up the opportunities for additional markets within a range. Obviously, we're still it's still going to be a dual prop aircraft, so it is limited to the region, but we're looking into multiple options. But for now, there's enough business for us to do between Paramaribo and Guyana, since there's so much happening in Guyana, and the Surinamese companies are supporting that economic growth there and from a business support. So our focus will be mainly on business travel. Obviously, anything that leisure comes is obviously welcome. But the thing is that we're looking towards is efficiency in our facilities to not waste the time of the business travelers, to come in as late as possible, get processed as quickly as possible, and fully focus on efficiency, not only for us as a company, but also for the client to be processed ideally.
Fantastic. And so effectively, does that now make it possible to, you know, fly from Paramaribo to sort of Georgetown in and out in a day? So you can go there for a day's meeting and back, or you could live in Paramaribo and work in Georgetown, and then as you expand to other regional neighbors, that possibility would you know, be applicable.
Yeah, so currently it's already possible to go out in the morning and come back in the afternoon because we have 3 times daily flights in combination with our partner from Trans-Guyana. So that's what we're doing from Zorg & Hoop. But there are some limitations in Zorg & Hoop due to the restrictions on the daylight operating hours, because the runway it's not a nighttime operating. We're adding that to our facility, so that would mean that we could operate into the night. So that would create the opportunity for someone, even in addition to the time difference we have got Guyana, that someone could live in Suriname, leave in the morning, go to Guyana, have a full day work, and come back in the afternoon, in the evening, in time for dinner with their family and kids that live here in Suriname.
That's fantastic to hear. And, you know, I've bounced between the 2 countries a lot, and for some reason hadn't used your facility yet, and certainly plan to this year. So fantastic to hear. You know, I thought that was, as you said, really inspiring, and I'm conscious we're over time again. But any kind of final remarks you'd like to leave with people off the back of the presentation and the Q&A?
No, I think we look at it from the holistic approach. Don't be afraid to invest. Look into gradually or organically getting into the business. Stay on top of mind for every all the oil and gas companies, but also don't forget all the opportunities we have amongst our local content to do business amongst each other. Even though we can't all deliver services to the IOCs or the tier 1 or tier 2 companies, but if we could offer services amongst each other, there's enough pie to be shared. So let's not be greedy and let's share the business opportunity.
Fantastic, wise words. And yeah, thank you very much, Timothy. And I look forward to catching up with you again soon.
Likewise, thank you.
So perfect. I mean, I thought that was a really enlightening presentation, and you know, very in keeping with the programming theme of this block on you know, sort of marketing and negotiation, and then moving on to the sort of negotiation side. I'm very happy to introduce our final presenter of the SEOGS Networks platform of the live programming blocks, which is William Bloom, Principal of Bloom Consultants. Again, someone I've had the pleasure to meet a couple of times in person and spoken to many times over the last few years. William is as an independent advisor to the energy industry based in Paramaribo, Suriname. Before this, his role was country manager of APA Suriname, providing independent consulting services through Bloom Consultants LLC in the USA. His prior experience includes 14 years at Shell, 9 years at Petrofac Energy Developments, 2 years at London Energy, and 2 years at Schlumberger Production Management. He's held various international assignments ranging from technical roles in engineering and offshore installation manager to a range of commercial roles in mergers and acquisitions, corporate finance, business development, and country management. Norway 2007, Tunisia 2009, Indonesia 2014 to 2015, Suriname 2021 to 2022. Now, William is also a director of AIEN, which is the Association of International Energy Negotiators, a fellow of the UK Energy Institute, an active member of SPE, and an NACD governance fellow. He holds an MSc in mechanical engineering from Delft University in the Netherlands, and attended corporate finance, even program school at London Business School. So fantastic to hand over for William to do the presentation on negotiating energy contracts.
Hello, my name is Willem Bloom. I'm delighted to be here at the SEOGS Networks. I am principal at Bloom Consultants NV, which is a company established in Suriname to provide consulting services to the energy industry. I really am very pleased to be here and help this beautiful country develop its energy resources as a consultancy, and also its overall development as a country. It's got so much to go for. I spent almost 2 years here in country, and it's a great place. So everybody, you know, I just want to share that with everybody. We go to the agenda. I just thought to start with an introduction. Then I wanted to explain, because I think it's sometimes misunderstood, where we are with the development of oil and gas resources in this country. We'll then go to really what this is about, contracts in oil and gas, and I'll give some examples, some that are probably relevant, others that are less relevant. So we'll concentrate obviously on those that are important to the Surinamese business community. And then what does it take? And that's really some advice, some pointers towards what companies can do to make them more successful in competing for these contracts. And then some negotiating issues. So we'll move on then. Yeah, and then having been here 2 years and having been in the industry itself for over 30 years, I can't stop thinking sometimes that people have such a beautiful image of oil and gas being found, and then all of a sudden, bingo, and we're sorted, as you can see in this picture. The expectations are, and that's very understandable, are very high, but it's going to take an enormous amount of work before production and therefore revenues may rise from oil and gas production. Energy projects are complex. And there's a lot of interdependencies, and we'll just need to understand a little bit of that before we can also understand what we can provide as a business to this industry, a local business community, I mean. Okay, I'm going to the next one. Yeah, so this may be a little busy, this slide. It's not meant to be a course in exploration and production, but there are various phases that you can recognize in the upstart of an oil and gas venture within exploration and production. And really, if you look at those images there, you always start with geological studies, some seismic acquisition. That basically means that you acquire data about the structure of the earth below your feet and below the sea. Then the next phase is going to be interpretation, mapping, and screening, where the geologists sit together and they decide what images they see on the seismic lines that they think are interesting. On the basis of that, a company decides where to drill exploration wells. There's always a number of prospects that are the structures that you want to drill, but there's always a discussion which one you're going to drill first and maybe next. So then that exploration drilling campaign starts. You usually start with one well, and then you see what you get. There's a possibility you get a dry hole. That's happened in Suriname. We can also have a successful discovery that has also happened, fortunately, in Suriname. So from all that information, you learn, and you further appraise the reservoir in subsequent wells. And all that sort of drilling activity and seismic is meant to do one thing. It's like to understand the volume of hydrocarbons that we have in the concession block that we have. That and other studies to do with how to develop will be done concurrently to arrive at an investment decision. This is all that we are at. We have no production offshore. We have no development offshore. Until that investment decision is taken, we will all be working on drilling wells, doing seismic, interpreting seismic, and that is really all that there is at the moment. And that might come across for some as a little strange, because well, in Guyana, it all went a lot quicker. Guyana is a very different story, different geology, different reservoir structures, different settings. That was about 6 years ago when that started. The prices are much higher now because of the higher oil price. And so there's a lot of factors to consider there. Well, it went a lot quicker then and here. And while the operators are still working to reduce these complexities and find a solution for this investment, that is what we're looking at. So, and the reason I explain that is because there's a lot of expectations. All of a sudden, we'll be buying all sorts of big kits and building supply bases. To an extent, that's happening. But really, the big event will be after an investment decision on one of the offshore blocks. And then that will give an enormous amount of activity. It will also boost the credibility of Suriname as a country, the investment worthiness. So a lot of good things come over that. But as you can see from this slide, I hope it shows how complex that is. The other thing I wanted to point out is that clearly what this means is at the moment it's only drilling and some seismic and the associated services such as offices, some transportation for the rig crews and so on. You go beyond that, if you go into an investment decision and production eventually, that will expand enormously. So I just wanted to give that idea because it's sometimes also not quite clear what it actually is that's going on offshore. So can we go to the next? So we're going to go to the contracts. Well, what kind of contracts are out there? So very briefly, and I'll concentrate on the ones that I think for this community are the most interesting. So there's the granting instrument. You sometimes hear the word production sharing contract. That's the contract between the government and the oil company. And then the little blue line on the right there says new ventures. These are the business units in the oil companies that deal with this. The next one is the joint venture agreements between the energy companies. So most of the blocks here have several parties investing, and they have certain agreements between them as to how to share costs and how to take decisions. That is typically the business development group to deal with that. But then we go into the things that are very visible, the drill ships, the helicopter, supply boats, and eventually an FPSO for production. FPSO stands for floating production, storage, and offloading. These are major capital assets. They cost several hundred, sometimes billions of dollars. And clearly the contracts associated with those mean that they're very often existing units that are brought in from abroad. Then we get to the delivery of products and services, the oil field services, logging tools, remote operated vehicles, but also things like food, fuel, transport, supply bases. And increasingly that is happening. And just recently, some of the drilling campaigns have been done completely out of Suriname, and I think that's a great development and offers an enormous amount of opportunity for the business community here to participate. There's of course also contract personnel that is different from oil company employees. Oil company employees are typically hired by the human resources group internally. But if a company deploys people to work on the rigs or work in the offices or something, very often in the beginning, that is done by the supply chain groups in the oil companies, and they typically use employment agency. So we can get back to questions if there are any later on. So what does it take for a Surinamese company to make an impression and to get into doing business with this exciting industry? And one thing is language. Invariably, oil companies speak English. Well, this is an English conference, or a conference in English. So I'm assuming that's not a problem for everybody. But sometimes it can be a little bit of a difficult thing, and also certain sensitivities that are not always perceived. There are multicultural differences. I myself have worked in quite a few countries. There's always different nuances on how people say yes or no, how people negotiate, what it means when someone says, well, I'll probably do it or not. So there are cultural differences to take into account. There's a certain degree of scale involved. It's probably fair to say that the companies that are active in Suriname right now would probably be mostly looking at companies that have some materiality in terms of personnel. That it's for a small business, unless you're incredibly specialized in a specific need, it would probably be difficult to win that business. Very important is what we call HSE, health, safety, and the environment, often combined with security. But safety is paramount. We're dealing with very dangerous, potentially dangerous substances on the rigs and in the products that we make. So safety is always the number one offshore. And the standards in the industry are very high, and sometimes you see that that's quite hard to build into with the way that's ingrained in their operations. Having said that, you see some excellent examples of companies here in Suriname who've embedded that fully. But be aware of it, that will be a big deal in the assessment. Quality standards, do you work to ISO standards, ISO 9001, that sort of thing? Is there a process to describe your businesses? That is quite often quite important. Well, it's often very important in the selection of partners. And then, reputation, focus on delivery. not only delivery on time, but also deliver what was agreed to be delivered. It seems obvious, but it's a big deal, and sometimes we have some way to go in that. And then last but not least, make yourself known. Well, you're all here. That's a good start. In fact, it's a great start. There's the supplier registration portal with Start Soli, which will be used to actually go to the market to see, okay, who can deliver this service. So all of these things are important. So then if we go on, just concluding, well, what would be required for negotiating contracts? I mean, I covered it a little bit with my my explanation of the exploration and appraisal, but it's understanding the needs of the energy industry, where we are going, and what the sort of expectations is. Clearly, FID is going to be a major milestone to be achieved, but we're not there yet. And but that gives you time to prepare and look at Guyana, what's happening there. So then I kind of covered that earlier on. Make an effort to show who you are: presentation, branding, communication. There are some really, really good people who can help with that. But just think about it. It makes a big impression, and all come to SEOGS with a beautiful stand. And we're looking forward to that. What an event that was last year. Focus on quality delivery, exceeding expectations, and of course, emphasis on local content and development. That goes for the oil companies, who are very keen. Some of them are big promoters. In fact, all of them are, in my experience. And local content development also means development of training, local capability, resources, educating people. So that's really good. And I've seen some excellent examples of that. And then finally, build long-term relationship. And that really is what makes this all work. So these are just a few pointers for contract negotiations. I think you'll probably all know how to negotiate. But I just want to say very thank you very much. I'd be happy to take some questions here and later on, perhaps in the follow-up forum. Thank you.
Hi, Willem. Hi, fantastic. Thank you so much for your presentation. And I think it really covered a lot of the themes and the discussions that we've been having over the last 2 days. So it was a fantastic kind of summary to end on. A couple of points that I think are really important and you touched on is a lot of people have been comparing Suriname to Guyana and asking those sort of questions of why are things different? And although it's one basin, as you mentioned, there's very, very different geologies. And I'm not a geologist, but that's what I hear from a lot of the people I speak to. I mean, that being said, there are also a lot of operators in offshore Suriname. There's the current Demerara offshore bid round going at the moment. I think that's due to close in May. There'll be another shallow offshore round due to open later this year. And as you mentioned, there's an awful lot of drilling campaigns. So, from everything I see and all the discussions I have, it seems that FID will come, and as you said, that will be a major milestone. And it's sort of not necessarily a question of if, it's a question of when. So I think the main message, and much like Timothy was saying, is start preparing now, and sort of get ready for that to come, and work out where you fit in on the supply chain. So I mean on that, are there kind of any top tips you'd give to local companies about what they can do now? I know you sort of covered some of that in your presentation on getting the certifications, but any other recommendations you would make to companies of maybe how they understand how they can get ready and prepare for these opportunities? I think you might be on mute. Wait, I think you're still on mute.
Here we go.
There we go. Perfect. Hey, how are you?
Very good, very good. No, it's been a great few days, actually, and thank you for your great summary. I've listened to all the presentations with great interest, and I'd just like to, because this was pre-recorded and now I've heard, of course, there's a bit of repetition there in what some of the operators said, and I really like the presentation on the local content and the NATIN. NATIN, the training institute, is, I think, a good example on how Staatsolie has worked with the industry to really build this up. And the question at the beginning was often, well, where are the jobs? Well, there are plenty of jobs. And if it's not directly in Suriname, there's a lot of jobs in the region. There are jobs with Staatsolie. That shouldn't hold you back. And so I have to praise Staatsolie for taking the initiative then, with support from the offshore operators, but just take that initiative, and we now have a full cohort being educated, and they'll be ready, I think, in a year and a half, which is just awesome, very good. Two other ones. I mean, I just heard Timothy talk about the Gumair experience. I mean, they took I had a lot of guts, actually, just to start up with that and bringing in a helicopter, making sure that all the facilities were there. Unfortunately, it was close to their own resort, which then meant that when COVID happened, when COVID started, it was actually a very close operation. I was involved in that myself a little later, but that couldn't have happened without the courage of those managers. And the last one I'll highlight, if I may, is the Kuldeep Singh port facility, who really worked very hard to get that facility ready, and then, well, with support from the government in the dredging campaign, made sure that that port was actually capable of supporting the offshore operations, deep water offshore, not shallow water. Deep water supply boats are a lot bigger; they need more draft, and that was a real issue in getting those in. So we're in a much better place there right now. So in summary, I mean, if I give those three examples, and there are many more, but really think ahead and try to move yourself into a position where you can execute an option. You probably don't want to completely pre-invest, because if it delays, then what you're going to do? You need to wait until you have the contract, but you can get yourself ready to bounce on it, to get it as and when it happens. And things like underlying enablers like training, certification, making sure you've got a good HSE practice. These are all things that will really empower you to be the top bidder when these things come out, and they are invariably competitively tendered. But I think I've seen enough local capability, local content in the companies to say it's really worth going for. It's really worth making that effort.
Absolutely, and I know a couple of local companies that signed some quite big contracts at the event last year in Paramaribo. I'm not going to mention names because I don't know if it's public knowledge, but I mean, it's we as the organizer, that's the nature of these things, is to facilitate that business and for these deals to be done. So often we don't know about it because they're happening in and around the side of an event or at an online event like this. So it's really fantastic when we do hear about that. And when you were talking about the supply chain, and it's the kind of some of the secondary goods and services, and I think you mentioned food in the supply chain, and you reminded me of Interfarm, who are a local company, and Marnie and I visited their facilities, I think 2 years ago in Paramaribo, and we had no idea at the time quite how large their operation has gone, and they work with lots of local farmers. They only really import what they can't produce or source locally. And the guys there had a list of international companies that have been doing business or looking to do in the business. I mean, their list was probably more advanced than mine when I first started out on this project a few years ago. So it just shows that if you're looking forward and you're planning ahead and doing your research, there are huge kind of opportunities there. I think you've been in living in Paramaribo for 2 years now.
Almost 2 years, yeah.
2 years, fantastic. And we were speaking the other day, and I know you've just moved into a new house, and as you've probably heard in some of the other presentations today, I've been asking people, how do you find it living in Paramaribo? Because I think it's an important message for people that are considering moving in. So how's your experience been in the last 2 years?
Well, it's been great. Of course, I arrived right in the middle of COVID, and the whole pandemic was a little later in terms of the peak in Suriname. Was pretty much around when I arrived in the spring of 2021, so just about 2 years ago. But it was because it's relatively lightly populated as a country and as a city. I did feel that apart from the lockdown weeks, it was pretty okay to move around, and people just found solutions for the restrictions that we all know that we had. Of course, it was very, very alarming what was happening at the time, but life went on in a way that, having just been through the same thing in my home country in the Netherlands and also in the United States, is much more restricted. So I'm glad that we're in a much better place now, thanks to vaccinations. This was actually all started to roll out when I arrived 2 years ago. I find it an incredibly friendly city. The weather is invariably really great. That's something that Europeans would say local people don't talk about the weather because, well, it is what it is. I think that's hilarious. I find people incredibly friendly, willing to, make contact, hang out, do things together. So I felt incredibly welcome here. And it was also that feeling that made me decide to stay longer after when I started up my new company and took the effort to actually indeed get into a property.
Yeah, well,
but I recommend it.
Yeah, congratulations on the new company and the new house. And I certainly encourage people to to visit Wilhelm. And he's got a fantastic wealth of experience over the years. And I think, as I said in the introduction, you're a member of AIN, UK Energy Institute, SPE. So when it comes to someone with your sort of knowledge and experience in the oil and gas sector from working in industry and as a consultant over many years, you're certainly a go-to man in Paramaribo. So it's fantastic for people to know that. And it's funny you're sort of mentioning about the pandemic, and I think I started the SEOGS Networks event yesterday saying, never expected to be doing another online event again after doing so many during the pandemic. But actually, the levels of engagement we've had over the last couple of days, and as I keep mentioning to all the participants, the platform is open for right until the end of the month. So although there won't be any more live content, please do watch stuff on demand and keep connecting. And actually, the level of engagement I think has been really good, and I think part of the reason for that, and one of the things I hear from a lot of internationals, is they find it very difficult to get market intelligence and insight on what's happening in Suriname. Partly, I guess, because of the language, and you touched on culture and languages in your presentation, and partly because it's not the easiest country to get to in the world, and I think many people experience that, including ourselves, and we've our teams from various different countries that were coming in to support the event last year, and good to know that Gamer and the new EA airport are helping solve that challenge. It's been a real pleasure actually to be back online. I wasn't expecting it to, and any sort of final closing statements for the 2 days you'd like to make? As you said, you've been actively engaged and seen most of the presentations, and if you'd like to make a sort of closing statement or summary, and then I'll present a little bit about what's coming up next. That would be fantastic.
Yeah, well, I'll be very brief given the time. You mentioned professional networks, AIN, SPE, Energy Institute. There's quite a few. There are local such organizations, a very active local SPE branch. We're doing some things again with AIN, with Marnie, and so that's a really, really a good way for professionals just on an individual level, but also companies to reach out, meet like-minded souls, meet like-minded companies, and connect. It's a great to communicate, and you learn a lot from that. I personally have done that. I find it fascinating, but the benefit of that has been enormous. Wouldn't have been here without it. So that's one thing. The other thing is, well, of course, I hope to meet many of you again who are in the forum. I have a consultancy. I'm focusing mostly on upstream entry, but also informing local content compliance supply chain. That sounds really complicated, but effectively partnership between local company and international service provider. And in fact, we're working with a team on one of those already, and that's really fascinating. And then alternative, basically decarbonizing natural gas could play a big role in this country, as well as renewables. So those are kind of my focus areas for the time being. And I think I've got enough on my plate, but always interested to learn more. So thank you so much, Alex. Once again, you've done a fantastic job, and I can't wait to see you guys again. Well, obviously you'll be here beforehand, but the big thing in June is something I thoroughly look forward to. It was a great thing last year. Well done.
Thank you so much, Wilhelm. Fantastic. Well, I think that, draws us to a close of the 2 days of kind of live content for SEOGS Networks. I wanted to thank all of our speakers, partners, network partners, supporters, participants. It's really been a fantastic couple of days. And I guess that just leaves me to mention a little bit about the main event that Willem mentioned in his kind of closing comments, which is the third edition of Staatsolly's Suriname Energy, Oil and Gas Summit and Exhibition that will be running in Paramaribo, Suriname, 19th to the 22nd of June 2023. I know many people that are online for this event are already signed up for the event this year. We were very, very happy with the way the event went last year. We're a little bit surprised with quite how much global interest that there is in the event, and quite how big it got in its, it was the second year, because we did the first one virtually, but it was the first in-person event. So I think I mentioned it earlier, but one of the things we're trying to do is build capacity as well. We're very lucky to be in a partnership with Staatsolly and Fossil Energy Consulting, and have the support of Marnie Dahl for our partners of the event. And I think, again, some people don't realize our job is primarily the international sales and marketing of the event and promoting international investment into Suriname. When it comes to actually delivering the event itself, all of the event is built and developed by local suppliers. And again, I think I mentioned earlier, we've made a considerable co-investment with Rowley's, our official stand contractor, to acquire a much larger Hall 2 for this year's event. And I think we're around about 70–80% of capacity in the exhibition already, which again is surprising considering the extra space we've managed to build in. We're also looking to expand out the summit this year by having a strategic summit and then separate technical streams and a separate roundtables and workshops programs. So it means we can have more capacity for more participants, more exhibitors, more delegates, more visitors, which is good for the event, good for the country, good for expanding networks, building supply chains, developing partnerships. And we'll also be running a youth empowerment program on the final day, and a hydrogen stream, because that's really additional value we're looking to add into the event. So yeah, I just wanted to thank everybody, thank our host Staatsolly, and we look forward to seeing everybody in Paramaribo this June, and please feel free to reach out directly to anyone on the team if you're interested in joining us later this year. And keep networking.